Hey guys, it's MJ, and in this video I want to talk about operational risk. Remember, this is me studying out loud, so these videos are going to be raw and unedited. Without further ado, let's get into operational risk. Operational risk kind of became on everybody's radar after it wiped out Barings Bank. That was a case of internal fraud where the trader started making those really reckless trades that brought down one of the oldest banks in England. But operational risk also refers to anything to do with mismanagement. And we're going to see later that that can be done with anything from computer systems to people to theft to, a whole bunch of things come down to operational risk. So it's quite a big one. And for that reason, it's quite difficult to model operational risk because you have to ask yourself, well, what really are we modeling? So one of the things is, yes, you've identified operational risk. It's quite a difficult one to measure, but it is quite an easy one to manage. Some of the common ways to manage operational risk is just to have good communication in place. Another one is to have a chain of reporting, and also to have a clear set of responsibilities and accountability for each person or manager or something like that. Responsibility and accountability. So this is an easy way to deal with operational risk. However, what's happened a lot with big corporations of today is that they've kind of gone overboard with operational risk. They've seen it as some sort of risk checklist that we have to do, and they start implementing all these procedures and policies and all these controls. And what it does is it creates a lot of red tape. Now, red tape is something that we use to refer to a lot of bureaucracy, or when work becomes an admin headache. So what this is that you cannot even go to the bathroom without filling out a form. And then once you come back from the bathroom, you need to fill back in the form. And they measured, the amount of time that you took to go to the bathroom. And if the CEO has to do this, he gets very upset. And that's one of the big problems with operational risk is the things that people put in place to try and combat it start creating new risks of their own. One of the big risks is key personnel are, well, how do I say this? Key personnel are encouraged to leave the company. Well, no, that's probably the wrong word to use. They're not encouraged, but because of all the administrative headache and all the red tape, they want to leave. They think, you know what, I'm sick and tired of dealing with all this bureaucracy. I don't want to have to fill in a form every time I want to go to the bathroom. I'm quitting. I'm taking early retirement. So that is one of the problems with having all these chains of reporting, all these things in, is that it can upset some of your key personnel. What it can also do is people can just start ignoring it. They can be like, you know what, I'm not going to fill out this form, and the whole system can break down. So when it comes to operational risk, it very much is a balancing act between, what defense mechanisms do we put in, and you want to be careful with it because otherwise your defense mechanisms can become quite an aggravating factors and cause other things. The big things are, though, is that management needs to understand traders' complex deals. I think this is something with Barings Bank that they also didn't do, and we see it quite a lot, where management doesn't really understand what the traders are doing. Like I was talking about in one of my earlier videos with the credit linked note, is even though that is considered as a bond, the credit linked note, even though it is considered as a bond, it is incredibly risky and it has a lot of credit risk attached to it. If management does not understand how these products work, they could let the traders get away with purchasing them and exposing the company to way much more risk than their capacity or appetite would allow for. So it's important for management to be smart and to understand what's going on. Because the thing is that you kind of have this, we're going to see it quite a lot here, is this agent versus principal problem. Ooh, the spelling's going crazy here. Agent versus principal problem, with the idea that sometimes in a corporation, specifically a large institution, is that the incentives are not aligned. So what I mean by that is you have a company, the overall company wants to make profit by taking on a reasonable amount of risk. But then what they have are their asset managers or their traders whose incentives are to get as much return as possible. They're not that concerned about risk because they have limited downside risk. Therefore, they would be very interested in these credit-linked notes because it allows them to potentially get more return by taking on more risk. So management needs to understand that in order to prevent that from happening. And one of the things that management does sometimes do is they do the separation of the front office versus back office. So front office versus back office. But this also doesn't always work. Remember from my credit management video where the one bank let some people issue the loans and the other group of people had to, be the safety net and either authorize or, block those loans. That offensive team and defensive team, they cause a lot of problems, and because of their differencing in incentives, it kind of caused the whole system to collapse. So go check out that video, but that is another case of operational risk. And I mean, the whole thing with operational risk is you want to put in enough procedures and controls so that you don't have to go into, crisis management, where everything's going crazy. You don't want people to panic. You want to have an early warning system and protect your company's reputation. So a big part of operational risk or management of operational risk is early warning systems. And I think this is one of those risks where, even the notes say they're even harder to model and predict than market or credit risk. And we saw already how difficult market and credit risk is to model. So when it comes to operational risk, it is incredibly difficult. And for this reason, a lot of people or a lot of companies have ignored it to their big detriment. But it is one of the areas where actuaries and other risk professionals can add a lot of value into society. And that is by consulting. So what you have is you have a trained risk professional. An example of that is the SERA qualification, which stands for Chartered Enterprise Risk Actuary. And what they do is they understand risk at an enterprise and holistic level. They will then be consulted to go to a company and they will know what to look for. They will know how to balance these two things together, and they will know how to optimize the management of operational risk. And they've got quite a few things in their tool set. They can create loss incident databases. They can, set up self-assessments, risk mapping, risk indicators, performance triggers, all those type of things. But essentially what you do as a consultant in operational risk is you come in and you want to identify the risks. And this is very difficult to do if you're off-site. So you actually have to pack your bag, go to the company's head offices or go to their operations and spend a day or two looking around, interviewing people, and trying to identify what risks is the organization exposed to. Once you've identified them, you want to assess the risk and evaluate their impact. So how bad are they? What are the consequences if they had to occur, and all these type of things. And then finally, you want to develop some sort of, what response should we do to these risks, and what are the actions that we want to take. And that could be something like setting up controls, having a training session, looking at what third parties the company depends on, what risks do they introduce, an interruption in the supply chain, what are their computer systems. Technology comes with a lot of risks of its own, hacking and downtime and all those type of things. I was just reading in the news, F&B had some technical issues the other day. So these all fall under operational risk. And like I said, it is a bit of a balancing act between having enough controls to catch and limit operational risk, but not having too many so that it becomes a bit of a red tape and administrative burden. And for that reason, trying to deal with operational risk, it's not so much that you can use pure maths and build nice little models. You can't really rely too much on that. Instead, it's a bit of an art, and you have to oh, how did I spell art there? Art, and it does come down to a lot to judgment. So you want someone who has a lot of experience and someone who has a risk dedicated qualification in order to be helping out with this. And it is something that, I mean, a lot of the audit firms do. Accountants are great with setting up policies and procedures, risk controls. They're also really great for this type of work, but it is something as well that actuaries can get into and help people with. Especially if you've got like a small business, let's say a logistic company, or you've got some sort of fishing industry, something like that. All businesses have some sort of operational risk, and all can benefit by consulting with a risk professional who can set up some sort of communication, some chain of reporting, define the controls and all these type of things, while not just going overboard like some people have done in the past by just referring to a textbook, which introduces this red tape and this massive headache. So at the end of the day, operational risk and the management of it does become a balancing act. And it's one of the risks that are the hardest to deal with because it has to be looked at when you're at the company, and it's very difficult to assess when you're looking through a company's share reports and trying to determine whether you should buy or not on the stock exchange. So do be aware of operational risks. They have caused some tremendous failures in the past, and they are quite a difficult one to manage. Anyway, next time we're going to be chatting about liquidity risk, so hit subscribe and those videos will be coming up tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Cheers.